Hi everyone, welcome back to our channel. My name is Tony and today we are, believe it or not, in Singapore. That's the city-state and country island in the middle of Asia Pacific. And today we're going to talk about how Singapore is so successful and why it's one of the top global financial centers together with London and New York and #1 in Asia. And for that, today we invited our guest. It's Angela Ang, Senior Policy Advisor at TRM Labs. Hello.
Hi, Tony. Great to be here.
So how does it feel to become the policymaker in the national regulator of your country when you just finish your school, your education?
You know, to come out of university and to be able to be exposed to policy making at the highest level in Singapore, to be able to work with senior management at the MAS, government ministers, and to be able to understand how they think about policy making, how they think about the next steps for Singapore. I think it was extremely enlightening, and I think I was just so fortunate to receive a lot of mentorship as well.
When I'm thinking about MAS and about Singapore in general, is that I was surprised. I mean, we are doing at Sumsub, we are doing RegTech, we are doing KYC. So we were focusing on the regulation related to non-face-to-face identification, all this stuff. And I was so surprised when I uncovered that as early as in 2018, MAS already allowed biometric identification. What is happening right now in the world, as far as I see it, is that most of the technological businesses, they don't feel comfortable in many jurisdictions, and they're trying to do what is called jurisdiction hopping. They're trying to find the best jurisdiction for themselves. Someone, for example, takes US just because they work in the US, and so they don't have any other choice. For example, others, they choose Switzerland, for example, because this is European jurisdiction. At the same time, it's not in the European Union, etc., etc. Someone go offshore, Cayman Islands, quite a recent example. FTX was on Cayman Islands. Some just don't claim that they have any headquarters. How do you feel? What is going on in the world of compliance currently, in the world of regulation? Will there be some kind of ideal jurisdictions for regulation of fintech? Is Asia ahead of the whole world?
There is no one answer to that question, yes. Right? What is the best jurisdiction for a financial institution, a fintech, to set up shop?
Yeah.
There's no one answer. It really depends on so many factors, the products, the target markets. I think different jurisdictions, different regulators will continue to have different philosophies.
Right.
Different priorities in terms of developing their regulatory framework, in terms of nurturing the ecosystem. But in terms of looking at this on a global scale, there's a lot of also discourse happening in terms of global standards at some of these international forums, FSB, FATF, and these are very important, right? I think we do see that regulators around the world, while they may have different approaches, they do reference and align to these to this global standards from some of these standard setting bodies, and that's important because it gives international regulators some sort of bar to converge towards. We will never have complete homogeneity in regulation, but we do see regulators around the world referencing IOSCO, FATF standards, and so on. And for example, even in the FSB and the Basel Committee on Banking Supervision, they've started to define characteristics of stablecoins, yes. And we see regulation. And actually, a lot of it has happened in the last 3 months, what we at TRM Labs are calling the stablecoin summer. They are regulatory frameworks, and what they regard as stablecoins is converging towards this definition, talking about being fully backed by liquid assets, being able to offer timely redemption at par. This kind of convergence towards these common characteristics. And this is particularly important in the world of digital assets and crypto because it is really borderless. And I think in general, financial services are just becoming more interconnected and borderless. So when regulators align towards these global standards, there are fewer regulatory gaps and therefore less potential for what we call regulatory arbitrage.
After the FTX crash, we saw that it is possible for a large company to be able to not to comply to anything, basically. So how do you think, how far does it go, and what prospects does the post FTX era having?
In every industry, there are good guys and bad guys. And I think, you know, when we look at FTX, it was a significant failure, but I would hesitate to kind of tar the industry with the same brush, right? What happened at FTX was just good old-fashioned fraud that really we've seen in traditional financial systems for decades, right? Think of Enron, think of WorldCom. We do see a recognition in the industry that the event like FTX and also Terra Luna, it has kind of eroded trust in the crypto ecosystem among stakeholders, and that there's a need to kind of rebuild that trust. And as part of that, you know, we do see industry players recognizing that robust compliance, strong risk management, good governance are an important part of that journey to gaining trust, and can be a very strong competitive advantage for businesses as well. So I think, you know, we do see a greater recognition of the importance of compliance, and I think the industry is on a journey, and I'm also quite encouraged by the kind of compliance-minded conversations that I'm having with different folks in the industry as well.
So you think everything is more like optimistic than pessimistic? And
well, I think there are people in the industry that believe in the value of compliance.
Me.
And me. You know, I think it is players like these that will be the long-term builders that we see in the industry.
What is the unique value proposition of Singapore?
Let's think about what makes Singapore unique. And I like to use 3 C's to describe it: clarity, collaboration, and calibration in terms of the regulatory approach. So, you know, clarity is very important, and I think this has been part of the discourse on crypto regulation, right? People are not looking for light touch regulation, they are looking for clear regulation where they know what to expect and they know what is expected of them, whether by looking at the frameworks, looking at the laws, but also, you know, by talking to the regulators. Which brings me to the next C, collaboration. I think it's very important to have that discussion, especially when you're regulating an emerging tech like crypto and blockchain. It's moving very, very fast. And it's important to have discourse between the regulators and the industry to really understand, for example, what are some of the practical challenges that they might face in meeting a certain requirement, and to listen. Of course, both sides may not always agree, but I think it is important to have those conversations because it helps with the 3rd C, which is calibration. And you know, there's a lot of discussion on this concept of same risk, same activity, same regulation, to really apply that thoughtfully. And in order to do that, you know, you have to really seek to understand the industry, understand the technology, and then, you know, be willing to calibrate and collaborate.
What exact maybe instruments are in place for that? For example, I know that in some jurisdictions you can, for example, apply for no action letter.
I think, you know, in Singapore, it's very much centered around dialogue, and this happens formally, right, through a public consultation process. MAS will go through a public consultation process every time it makes major regulatory changes. But there's also that kind of soft consultation process where MAS is actively engaging with the industry. This includes, you know, engaging through industry bodies, for example, the Blockchain Association of Singapore, Access, the Crypto Association, the Singapore FinTech Association.
One of the typical problems that crypto businesses are facing is obviously with cash in, cash out. So you have money in crypto and you need to get money in cash and fiat. So is it possible in Singapore, and to which extent?
Yeah, so I think, you know, crypto, like any other asset class, if they want to engage with banks, you know, to open a bank account, for example, they have to go through the bank's due diligence process. And like many other jurisdictions, there has been a learning process, both for the banks and the traditional financial institutions, as well as for the crypto businesses, in terms of understanding each other. ACIP actually recently issued a guidance document setting out expectations for banks and financial institutions in terms of AML, CFT, and sanctions risk when dealing with customers with a crypto nexus it tells banks and financial institutions, okay, when I deal with a crypto business, this is what I should look out for. And it tells the crypto businesses, if you want to deal with a bank, this is what they're looking out for. And the other thing that we see in Singapore is that banks themselves are engaging in the digital assets and crypto ecosystem. And that definitely helps with the understanding as well. For example, DBS Bank, which is the largest bank in Singapore, it actually was one of the first entities to be granted a digital payment token license by the MAS to run its own digital asset exchange. Yeah, and JP Morgan is also very active in terms of blockchain innovation in Singapore, banks like Standard Chartered. So I think we do see traditional finance players in Singapore engaging with the ecosystem, and that also helps to build up understanding of the tech and of the industry landscape.
Now a negative side to all of this. Singapore is very uniquely based, I would say. It's in the heart of Southeast Asia. So all these countries, they are very much peculiar. Some of them are known as more or less corrupt regimes. Other countries are known, at least claimed, to be quite serious producers of drugs. This obviously may create certain problems in terms of money laundering. There's a very recent case of Joe Low. He's wanted by the Singapore police and Malaysian police, and he's right now in China, in Macau. I saw he has a Cypriot passport. That's a very typical situation. How do you think how these risks are mitigated by Singapore, and to which extent they are serious for Singapore, I would say?
I think anyone who's been following the news in Singapore would have seen the recent money laundering crackdown by the Singapore police.
Yes.
Police have seized assets including vehicles, over 250 luxury bags and watches. Not only this, 2 gold bars, more than 270 pieces of jewelry, bottles, liquor and wine, along with cash and 11 documents with information of virtual assets.
Yeah.
It was your post, by the way.
we started with the seizures of about $1 billion in assets, and then that has actually ballooned as of yesterday to 2.4 billion Singapore dollars in asset seizures relating to that case. So I think it is very clear from cases like these that enforcement, rigorous enforcement, both from the law enforcement side, the police, as well as from the regulatory side with the MAS, are a key part of Singapore's strategy to ensure that its AML and CTF controls are effective and that it doesn't become a conduit for money laundering. Tony, I think the other thing that's worth noting about the recent money laundering crackdown is that it had its beginnings in one of the most humble controls of AML, the Suspicious Transaction Report. Yeah, it was actually triggered by STRs. And that is evidence that compliance controls in Singapore are working. I mean, of course, there are, that case also kind of exposed certain gaps that we need to work on, but I think as a whole, it shows that Singapore takes very seriously its AML CFT obligations. In the press release, MAS said very clearly it will not tolerate abuse of our financial system for illicit activities. And I think this is also expressed in its regulatory approach and resourcing to the area. MAS has a dedicated team of AML policymakers and supervisors that look specifically at this risk in the space. MAS was one of the first regulators globally to mandate full compliance with the travel rule for crypto businesses seeking to get a license here. And so we can see that it's really very, very serious about making sure that the controls are working and that we do not fall prey to these kind of activities.
So there are other countries that are also taken very seriously AML controls. At the same time, they are also quite active in terms of regulation of new technologies. For example, Japan, and then South Korea, and Taiwan, and Hong Kong, of course. What would you tell about this general situation?
I think naturally after the events of 2022. Crypto and digital assets has just attracted more regulatory attention, and rightfully so. And we've seen kind of like a quite rapid raising of the bar worldwide, of course at different paces. We've seen a lot of discussion on global standards, frameworks for regulation of crypto assets, and that is important. Again, going back to that theme of the more alignment, it will never be full alignment, it will never be full homogeneity. But the more alignment that you have in terms of regulatory standards, then the less potential for regulatory arbitrage. And I think most global regulators are kind of holding the bar very high in terms of crypto compliance and regulation. So I think that is just basically the new normal for digital asset businesses that want to continue to thrive and innovate. That is just the new normal that we have to deal with. There's no one straight answer to where is the best place for my business to set up. It really depends on what your objectives are. I think I can comment briefly on the developments in Japan and Korea. Actually, Japan is one of the most advanced jurisdictions. It has, crypto just has quite a long history in Japan. Japan is home to one of the oldest crypto exchanges. It has one of the oldest dedicated regulatory frameworks for crypto in the world. That's about 6 to 7 years old.
Oh.
Yep. So, and this year, they've just introduced a regulatory framework for stable coins. And there's also a lot of kind of interest in, crypto and blockchain innovation that's going on in the country. And that's not just because the name Satoshi Nakamoto is Japanese. And in Japan, there's also support from policymakers for Web3 innovation. And they're kind of looking at some quite interesting concepts, for example, around DeFi regulation, tinkering with the concept of, can we recognize DAOs in a kind of limited liability corporation type structure? So there's quite a bit of innovative thinking going on in Japan, at the same time very rigorous regulation. South Korea is also looking at the space, and finally they've just passed their very first kind of broad regulatory framework for virtual assets through the National Assembly. It's called the Virtual Asset User Protection Act, and I think that's a focus area for them. They're also looking at how to tackle cybercrime, looking at consumer protection issues. So I think different jurisdictions are making progress, and regulation is only one piece of the puzzle, right? You need to look at what your target markets are, whether the ecosystem in a particular country, for example, has the right partners for your needs, and there's so many factors to consider. So I don't think there's one right answer that say that you should consider this jurisdiction and not the other jurisdiction.
South Korea is also known for kimchi premium, which is basically means that you can sell crypto in South Korea for more than in other places. That's how FTX was started, as far as I know. Now moving to your second hat, which is TRM Labs. Tell us a bit TRM Labs. As far as I understand, it's like a blockchain analysis solution. So
TRM Labs has really built our capabilities to excel in this multi-chain world where people are engaging with a wider variety of crypto assets and also moving their assets across different blockchains. So it's multi-chain, cross-chain. And blockchain data really backs up that this is the kind of reality that we live in. Our illicit crypto ecosystem report that we just released found through our proprietary TRM intelligence that, over the last 5 years, we've seen Bitcoin dominance really start to come off in crypto crime. So looking at overall illicit volumes, in 2016, Bitcoin's share of this was 97%. Today, it is 19%. Same story in crypto hacks.
97, and now it's 19.
19, as of last year. Same story in crypto hacks. It was 2/3 of the total volume in 2016. Last year, 3%.
Wow.
In terrorism financing, Bitcoin was basically the dominant currency 5 years ago. Last year, it had basically been replaced by assets on the Tron blockchain. So we're really starting to see a movement to this multi-chain, cross-chain world, for both illicit and licit purposes.
Is it because Bitcoin is very well indexed now, and so the fraudsters and terrorists, they're just trying to leave Bitcoin for other types of blockchain because they're less indexed and less researched, etc., etc. Probably that's the reason.
Different illicit actors are motivated by different reasons, but I think just kind of like the general trend we see is that Bitcoin dominance is coming off. And what this means is that, you need, as a blockchain intelligence tool, you need to ensure that your asset coverage is expansive. So right now, TRM Labs covers 28 blockchains and counting, and that means over 1 million digital assets. We also kind of built our tool to have a delightful user experience in terms of looking at cross-chain analytics as well. So we try to make sure that our users can visualize cross-chain movements in a very intuitive way.
But still, if we have such a great, let's say, indexing, for example, Bitcoin, why I think 6 out of 8 private owners, like top private owners of Bitcoin, are now undisclosed? This is the question that always tearing me apart.
So I guess your question is, if the blockchain is indeed so transparent, why is there still crime? That's the broader question.
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
If we have spent millions or even billions of dollars on anti-money laundering control as a collective financial center, why does financial crime still exist?
Yes.
It is because, crime is an inevitability. It will always kind of be there. But what is important, as you and I both know, is to make sure that we constantly evolve our tools to ensure that our controls and our abilities to combat financial crime remain up to date with the latest, modus operandi of these different financial criminals.
I know that you have also the blog in LinkedIn.
Yeah, I like posting pictures of food. It's a national hobby here in Singapore. We are very fond of our food, so I always try to educate about crypto policy and share a local culinary tidbit or two.
Yeah, I was mesmerized, really, like very high-level, serious discussions of various problems in AML, and then you have kimchi or other national food of Singapore, Korea, and other places around. Very nice, very interesting blog, by the way. So I can recommend you to subscribe.
We also have a weekly newsletter, the TRM Labs weekly roundup, and that's global. Please also subscribe to the weekly roundup that's linked on my LinkedIn.
That's basically it. I'm sure that you have more questions about Singapore. That's endless discussion. That's a great place to be and a great place to discuss, especially in terms of financial regulation. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please put them below the video. If you like this video, please put the I like this video. And I thank Angela for this fantastic talk. Thank you very much.
Great to be here. Thank you.
That's it.